How do you make vinegar from all the apple scraps? Today I'm going to show you how. G'day there, I'm Dana from Pewakaka Valley Homestead, and I have been canning some apples without using sugar, so I will put a link to that video up here for you. Today I'm going to be using all of the scraps that I have to make some apple cider vinegar. We use apple cider vinegar a lot around the farm. We add it to animal water, particularly if they're unwell, but it can also be used as a health tonic. You can use it as a human, just putting a teaspoon of it in your water every morning. It's really good for your digestion. And you can use it for cleaning, you can use it for preserving, we use it for cooking. There's so many things that you can use apple cider vinegar for, and you can make it at home for free. It's a rainy, dark day here today, and usually I send the kids outside or somewhere else if I'm trying to get some videoing done. But we can't do that today, so if they randomly pop up, especially the toddler, just forgive me. It is what we're dealing with today. So for making this apple scrap vinegar, you will need some jars, obviously some apple scraps. These are pie apples, they're cooking apples. They hold their shape when you cook them, but these are all the skins and the cores from the ones I've been processing. The other thing I have is some from the freezer that I did the other day. So if you don't have a large batch that you're going to be working on, you can just save the apple cores and the apple skins that the kids haven't eaten and just put them in a bag in the freezer and slowly build up a stash from there. You'll need a jar that will fit these in pretty firmly. So just work out, try and pair them up, work out how many apple scraps you need to save up versus how big your jar is that you're going to be using. So these are just canning jars that I have that unfortunately have got little weakness cracks in the bottom, so they're fine for doing cold stuff in, but I can't heat them up anymore. So I'm going to show you two different ways of doing these. This one, hang on, I need to grab something off the shelf. This one is using a little fermentation lid, and it's got a vent on the top. So this will allow the gases to escape. It will make bubbles for the first week or so. So this allows the gases to escape without letting other air in there and without getting it all gooby and gross. So I have one of those. So that's one option. These are really affordable to buy on Amazon these days. And the other thing I have, the other way of doing it, is I have these little glass weights that fit perfectly in the top of these jars. So when you're fermenting anything, you need to be able to keep the fruit or vegetable or whatever fully submerged underneath the water. Otherwise you will find it will go moldy and ruin your ferment. What you doing, buddy?
Chocolate.
You want chocolate?
There
you go. Right, go play. Chocolate bribery. So you need to keep the fruit and vegetable underneath the water. So it is an anaerobic fermentation, and that is what the yeasts and the bacteria do. So that's how it creates the alcohol that will then get converted into vinegar. So first up, the reason they call it apple cider vinegar is because first up you are making apple cider. So it is apple scrap vinegar. So apple cider is made from straight apple juice, right? This is not straight apple juice, but it will be apple flavored sugar water, which is basically the same thing. So I'm just going to shove all of my scraps in this jar. Hang on, I'll turn you around so you can see. So we're just shoving all these scraps in this jar. Now these apples are fresh off the tree. I haven't given them a good wash or anything. I wiped any obvious nasties off them. I'm just going to put something under this board because it keeps rattling. The last thing you want is me talking with rattling in the background. Right, we'll just chuck a tea towel under there. That's better. So I'm going to be packing them in, not super tight, but enough that there's a fair few of them in there. And I've cut any obvious rotten bits off, I've cut off as well. But for the most part, they are just as the apples were on the tree, because they have natural yeasts all on the outside, which is what we need for the fermenting process to happen. So we're just going to shove all this apple spaghetti in here. Now once it has fermented, these apple scraps can then go to the chickens or the pigs or into your compost. They don't need to go to waste. This is a great way of getting multiple uses out of your rubbish. So this jar is pretty full and I still have more, so I need to go and find another jar. Now, the other thing you will need to add to each of these quart jars is 2 to 3 tablespoons of just plain old white sugar. Because we're relying on the yeast to do the fermenting, you need to give the yeast and the bacteria something to be eating. So they thrive off of sugar. So at the end, once it's all fermented out, there will be no sugar left in there. But you need to give them the sugar to get it going. And then all we need to do is top these up to just below the rim with water. If you notice any big air bubbles happening, you can just chuck a knife down the side just to release the air bubbles out. As I said, the aim is to have no air in there for the yeast and bacteria to ferment. So if you can release that out of there, that's all the better. Now I haven't bothered stirring in the sugar either. It will just naturally dissolve into the water. There's no point in doing all those extra steps if you don't need to. And then the ones that you're putting these seals on, you can fill them quite far up because this will stop them overflowing. It makes quite a good seal and it lets the air escape. I've just realized the camera is in the way of the light. It's probably not so helpful. So I'm going to top the 2 up that I'm putting those lids on to within quite close to the top. It's not quite over the top, but it's pretty close to the top. And then screw the band down to create a decent seal. Now this vinegar will make the so-called healthy vinegar that you hear talked about on health websites. It's the vinegar with the mother. And so what the mother is just the bacteria and yeast that are naturally growing in there. Now this one, I'm going to be using the weight option. So I haven't filled it all the way up because this weight will displace some of the water. And you just push it down until the water comes up over the top. And then I'll cover this with a cloth and wrap a piece of rubber band around it. I just don't know where one is right now, so I'll do that soon. So either of these options is perfectly legitimate. Both of them will work. This one with the metal, with the glass weight, you do have to push it down about once a day, maybe twice a day for the first week or so as it's creating lots of bubbles. Otherwise you'll find that the whole thing will start climbing out the top of the jar. So I will usually sit these in a tray of some description in case they do start escaping before I get round to pushing them down. If you find floaty bits of apple on the top, just flick them out, because they will go mouldy. Now this type of vinegar creates the really healthy, raved about sort of vinegar that has the mother in it. So if you can see in here, I don't know if you can from there, I'll try and tip you forward. If you can see these floaty bits in here, and that is what's commonly called a SCOBY, or a symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast. So that SCOBY is what is alive in this vinegar. So that is sort of one of the main health benefits is that it becomes a probiotic. There's also chemicals in here which are also beneficial, obviously the acetic acid or the vinegar, but also there are other benefits to having vinegar with the mother. So this particular way of making it will make that very expensive fancy pants vinegar for basically free. So these jars I will then sit somewhere. I usually just leave them over on my shelf to the side of the kitchen or leave them on the kitchen counter for between 2 and 3 weeks. Sometimes I forget them and leave them much longer. This vinegar here I forgot about, and I have only just tipped the apple slices out the other day. So what you do is you leave them for the first week or so, maybe the first 10 days. You'll probably have to manage the amount of bubbles that are coming up, otherwise it will start to spill out the top of the jar. So all you need to do is just push the weight down. If you don't have a weight, you can just get a little glass jar that fits in the top of your existing jar and fill it with a little bit of water, and that makes a perfectly good weight as well, rather than having to buy any of these. If you're doing lots of fermenting though, these are brilliant. Just remember to take them out of your jar before you tip whatever's left in the compost, or if you have a failed ferment, make sure you take them out before you feed them to the chickens. Otherwise you lose them in the hen house. Ask me how I know. So I will sit these just at room temperature. Once the 2 to 3 weeks is up, you strain out the apples and you are left with a murky looking liquid like this. It might still taste quite sweet and it might still smell alcoholic, and that is okay. Now you need to switch from the yeast fermenting to the bacteria who convert the alcohol into vinegar. So this will now need to sit for another month or so for all of the alcohol to be converted into vinegar. It will store like this for a very, very, very long time. The only thing it might do is grow a SCOBY on the top. So I'm going to grab my kombucha and show you what a really well developed SCOBY can look like. This is my very neglected kombucha jar. I haven't actually been making kombucha for a very long time and I need to get back into it. But this is a SCOBY. So if you end up with something like this on the top of your vinegar, it's still perfectly safe and healthy to drink. This is just a cellulose network that has been built up by the bacteria and the yeast together. And this smells very vinegary. So it happens on kombucha, that's how you make sweet tea into kombucha, but it also happens in live vinegars. If you get a white thin film on the top of your vinegar, that's okay as well. That's something called calm yeast. It's not harmful, it's not delicious, but it's not harmful. It can be a little bitter. You can just scoop it off the top or you can leave it be. It doesn't matter too much. It's perfectly fine. If you notice grey, fluffy, obviously mold happening, your ferment is stuffed and you just need to take your weight out and give the whole thing to the chickens, because mold spores will get down into everything and make it taste gross, and it's not so good for you. And then once these have been sitting for a couple of months and they smell nice and vinegary, you can then pour them into a bottle or leave them in the jar, but pour them into a bottle and just store them somewhere cool and dark, and they will last a really long time. I hope you found this video really useful. If you have, hit the like button. Consider subscribing to our channel. We bring you videos twice a week on growing and preserving your own food and other homesteading bits and pieces. We'll see you in the next one.